How's that sound? I gave that woman everything I had, working 3 jobs, sacrificing my college education so she could chase her dreams. I poured my blood, sweat, and years into building a future for us. And how did she repay me? With betrayal. She decided I wasn't up to her standards, the very standards I broke my back to create for her. Unbelievable, right? But you know what they say, he who laughs last, laughs best. And let me tell you, I had the last laugh. You're not going to believe how life flipped the script on her. But let's not jump ahead. Let's start at the beginning. My name's Jack Mitchell, born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma. My folks weren't rich, but they were solid. Dad, Gary, worked 35 years at Turner's Tool and Die. Mom, Martha, was a school librarian. They taught me what mattered: hard work, loyalty, and standing by your word. I met Rachel during my first year at the University of Oklahoma in Norman. She was a junior studying business. We met at the Betrayal Memorial Library. I was buried under an econ textbook, and she offered to help. Blonde hair in a loose ponytail, green eyes sharp and confident. She was brilliant with numbers, and I was drowning in them. We started studying together, but pretty soon, those study sessions turned into coffee at Aspen Coffee Company and late-night burgers at the Mont. Rachel was driven. She had her life mapped out. She wanted to work in finance and be a major player one day. Me? I wasn't sure where I was heading, but I knew I wanted her in my future. She liked that I worked with my hands and wasn't afraid of hard work. By the time she graduated, we were inseparable. She landed her first job at First National Bank in Oklahoma City. Meanwhile, I was still grinding through my sophomore year, but money was getting tight. My savings from working at Hudson Steelworks after high school were drying up, and tuition bills were piling up. Then, one night over beers at O'Connell's Irish Pub, Rachel dropped a bombshell. "I'm thinking about getting my MBA," she said, eyes bright with excitement. "But it's expensive. I don't know how I'll swing it." I didn't even hesitate. "We'll figure it out," I said. By we, I meant me. The next semester, I made the hardest decision of my life. I dropped out of college. I told myself I'd finish later, but right then, Rachel's dream came first. Somebody had to pay for it, and that somebody was me. I picked up 3 jobs. Days started at Tulsa Freight Depot, hauling crates from 5 a.m. to noon. After that, I changed into my coveralls and spent afternoons under car hoods at Tom's Auto Shop, turning wrenches and scraping grease from my knuckles. Evenings, I bartended at Riverside Grill, slinging drinks for the after-work crowd until past midnight. Sundays were my only day off, and even then, I was so wiped I barely moved from the couch. We lived in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment on Riverside Drive. Hand-me-down furniture, a recliner from my dad, and a coffee table I built from scrap wood. The kitchen faucet leaked, and the heater clanged all night in the winter, but it was ours. Rachel, meanwhile, was working full-time at the bank and taking MBA classes part-time at the Price College of Business. I paid every cent: her tuition, her books, her gas. She worked hard, no doubt, but I was breaking myself in half to make sure she could keep climbing. I'll be honest, those years wore me down. I drank more gas station coffee than I care to admit, and my old '98 Ford F-150 racked up over 150,000 miles. Its cracked leather seats and busted radio felt like a second home. But Sunday mornings, when Rachel brewed us coffee and we sat on the couch dreaming about our future, it felt worth it. She always said, "Jack, one day you won't have to work so hard. This will all pay off. You'll see." And I believed her. The grind went on. I tore through 2 pairs of work boots and lost count of how many times I banged my knuckles bloody on engine blocks. I didn't complain. Hard work was what I knew. But things started to shift with Rachel. Her world was changing. She started rubbing elbows with big names at networking events, bankers, investors, people who had never worked a callus into their hands. She started talking about image and connections and how we'd need to level up if we wanted to keep up. One night, I picked her up from a class dinner at the Jones Assembly. She slid into the truck and frowned at the torn seat. "Jack," she sighed, "maybe it's time to upgrade this old thing." I patted the dashboard. OL Blue's got plenty of life left. She didn't smile. "It just doesn't fit where we're heading." That stung, but I shrugged it off. She was under a lot of pressure, and I figured once the MBA was done, we'd settle back into ourselves. Rachel graduated with her MBA, debt-free, thanks to me. That night, I took her to Lake Hefner. The sky was brushed in gold and pink as the sun dipped low, and I pulled out a simple gold band I'd saved months for. "Rachel," I said, my voice thick with nerves, "I've worked for us because I believe in you. In us. Will you marry me?" Her eyes welled up, and she whispered, "Yes, Jack. Always." That was the happiest moment of my life. We got married that fall at St. Mary's Church in Tulsa. Small and simple, just family and a few friends. My dad built a cedar arch for the altar, and my mom made Rachel's bouquet. We couldn't afford a fancy reception, so we had a backyard barbecue at my folks' place. But it felt right. It felt ours. Married life wasn't easy. Rachel landed a new job, Redwood Financial Group in Oklahoma City. She said it was a major step up, better pay, better title. I was proud of her. Meanwhile, I was still wrenching at Tom's and bartending at Riverside Grill. She told me I didn't have to, but how could I stop? Working was all I knew. But things started to change. I'd come home from a double shift, hands raw, boots caked in grease, and Rachel would barely glance up from her laptop. She was always working reports, conference calls, networking dinners. She started staying out late, hitting places like Broadway Tin Steakhouse with clients. "You're always working," she'd snap if I asked her to sit with me for a bit. Funny. So was I. I thought we were building something together. I thought we had the same finish line in sight. I guess I thought wrong. The life had other plans. I was still working 3 jobs, bartending at Riverside Grill, hauling freight at Tulsa Freight Depot, and fixing cars at Tom's Auto Shop. I was running on fumes most days, but I kept at it because I thought we were building something together. Rachel's job paid well, but between her car payment on a shiny new Lexus RX 350 and her work trips, we weren't exactly swimming in extra cash. She kept saying her career was an investment for our future. I believed her. At first, things seemed fine. Rachel was busy, but I expected that. She started staying late at the office for client meetings and team dinners at spots like Vast, that fancy restaurant on the 49th floor of the Devon Tower. I didn't mind. Networking was part of her job. She was building connections, climbing the ladder. But little cracks started to show. She started coming home later and later. I'd ask, "Long day?" She'd nod, barely looking up from her phone. She was glued to that thing, texting, checking emails, always busy. Our conversations got shorter, and she started pulling away. Even on Sundays, our one day together, she'd be on her laptop, claiming she had reports to finish. One night, she came home around midnight. I was half asleep on the couch, the TV flickering with some late-night show. When she walked past me, something caught my nose, a sharp cologne. Not hers. Not mine. I sat up. "Where you been?" "Work dinner," she said, setting her purse on the counter without making eye contact. I frowned. "Since when do your clients wear cologne?" She froze for half a second, then brushed past it. "Must have been the restaurant. You know how those places are." But I knew that smell. It wasn't from a restaurant. It was personal, up close. I let it go that night, but my gut was twisting. Something felt wrong. A few days later, it hit the fan. It was a Friday. I had just finished a 14-hour shift, 8 hours at the auto shop and another 6 at the bar. My boots felt like concrete, and my arms were sore from slinging crates and changing tires. I got home around 10 p.m., hoping to share a beer with Rachel, maybe watch a movie like we used to. But the apartment was cold and empty. No note, no text. At 1:30 a.m., I heard her key in the lock. She walked in, laughing softly into her phone. When she saw me sitting in the recliner, her face dropped like she wasn't expecting me to be there. She ended her call quick. "Work thing?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She set her bag down slow. "Yeah. Todd took us all out for drinks after a big client win." Todd. I'd heard that name before. Todd Beckett, her boss. A senior VP at Redwood. She had mentioned him a few times. Said he was sharp and well-connected. I never thought much of it, but something in her voice felt off. I stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. "You didn't think to call?" She sighed, brushing past me. "I didn't think it was a big deal, Jack. You're always working anyway." That hit me right in the chest. Rachel, I am working. For us, I said, my voice hardening. So you can have that job. So you can drive that car. So you can? She turned on me, eyes flashing. For us? Jack, you're breaking your back for peanuts. I'm the one making real money now. Maybe if you stopped killing yourself at those dead-end jobs, we'd actually be getting somewhere. That shut me up. Not because she was right, because she wasn't. It was my money that paid for her degree, my sweat that built the road she was walking on. But I didn't argue. I just felt something inside me crack. The truth dropped a week later. It was a Tuesday. I remember because it was my only day off, and I spent most of it fixing the kitchen sink that had been leaking for weeks. Rachel came home early, which was rare. Her face was tight, like she was bracing for something. We need to talk, she said. I set my wrench down, wiping my hands on an old dish towel. All right, what's on your mind? She hesitated, then let it out. I can't do this anymore, Jack. I'm leaving. The words hit like a sledgehammer. I felt the air get sucked out of the room. What? I'm tired, she said, crossing her arms. Tired of struggling. Tired of waiting for life to get better. I want a different life. I stared at her, my hands shaking. Rachel, what are you talking about? We are building a life. She cut me off. No, I'm building a life. You're just stuck? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Stuck? I've been breaking my back for you. Her voice sharpened. Exactly. For me. But what about you, Jack? You're still the same guy I met in college. Same truck. Same boots. Same everything. I've grown. And you've stayed in place. I felt like the ground had opened up under me. So you're leaving because I'm not good enough? She looked away. I'm leaving because I found something else. My stomach dropped. Who? I asked, my voice low. She didn't answer. Who, Rachel? I pressed. Finally, she sighed. It's Todd. The name hit like a punch. Your boss? She didn't deny it. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Todd understands me. He knows what I want out of life. And he can provide it. Provide it. I felt my whole body go cold. So that's it? I said, my voice barely a whisper. I break my back so you can have your dream. And the second you get a taste of the good life, you trade me in for your boss? Her eyes flicked away. I'm sorry, Jack, but this isn't working. You'll find someone better for you. I stood there, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something, but I didn't. I just stared at her. And in that moment, something inside me went still. I realized the woman I had sacrificed everything for, the woman I thought I was building a future with, was gone. Maybe she had been gone for a long time, and I was just too damn busy to notice. Rachel packed her things over the next few days, took her fancy clothes, her designer handbags, and that damn Lexus. She didn't take the wedding photo from the mantle. I guess she didn't need it. When she walked out the door for the last time, she barely looked back. And me? I just stood there in the silence, feeling the weight of every hour, every dollar, and every sacrifice I had made for a woman who threw it all away. But you know what? That was the day I stopped living for her. And it was the day my life truly began. The ink on the divorce papers hadn't even dried when my phone rang. I was sitting in the cab of my old '98 Chevy Silverado, parked outside Tom's auto shop after a long shift. My hands were cracked and raw from wrestling with a stubborn transmission, and I still smelled like motor oil. The number on my phone was from Barkley & Owens law firm out of Dallas. My gut tightened. I wasn't expecting any calls from a lawyer. Had enough of that during the divorce. Jack Mitchell, I answered, wiping my forehead with the back of my hand. A calm, professional voice replied. Mr. Mitchell, this is Walter Owens from Barkley & Owens. I'm the executor of your grandfather's estate. I'm sorry to inform you that Frank Mitchell passed away last week. The words hit me like a brick to the chest. Grandpa Frank, I managed, my voice cracking. Frank Mitchell, my dad's old man. I hadn't seen him in a few years, but growing up, I spent every summer at his ranch in Abilene, Texas. He was a giant of a man, with rough hands and a booming laugh. He taught me how to ride horses, drive a tractor, and shoot straight, not just with a rifle, but with my words. His favorite saying was, "Jackie, a man's only as good as his word and his work." You remember that. The last time I saw him was 2 Christmases ago. He was slower, grayer, but still sharp. We sat on his porch, watching the sun dip behind the mesquite trees, and he said, "I'm proud of you, boy. You got grit. Don't ever let the world take that from you." Now he was gone. I didn't know, I said, my throat tight. I wish I could have. "I understand, Mr. Mitchell," Owens said softly, "but there's something you need to know. Frank named you as his sole beneficiary. He wanted you to have everything." I blinked. "Everything?" "Yes. And that includes," he paused, then said, "a sum of $2 million. The world seemed to stop. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice hoarse. "Did you say $2 million? "That's correct, Mr. Mitchell," Owens replied calmly. $2 million, from the sale of his ranch and some wise investments he made over the years. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't know he had that kind of money. "Frank was a very private man," Owens said, "but he always spoke highly of you. He said, 'Jack's the hardest working man I know. He'll know what to do with it.'" I don't even remember driving home. I sat on the couch in my tiny apartment, the check for $2 million in my hand, and just stared at it. My old truck keys were still on the coffee table. The smell of motor oil still clung to my shirt. $2 million. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. All my life, I had fought, scraped, and bled just to keep my head above water. Worked 3 jobs, dropped out of college, put my dreams on a shelf, all to build someone else's future. And what did that get me? A cold apartment, a broken heart, and divorce papers. And now this. I wasn't the kind of man who ever expected a handout. Hell, I'd spent my whole life believing you only got what you earned. But this wasn't a handout. It was something more. I stared at Grandpa Frank's picture, an old frame I kept from my childhood summers on his ranch. There he was, in his dusty Stetson, with his arm around me after we mended a fence line together. I was just a scrawny kid in muddy boots, beaming up at him. "You sure about this, Grandpa?" I muttered. "I don't even know where to start." The silence in the room felt heavy, but I could almost hear his voice in my head, rough and steady as ever. "Don't overthink it, Jackie. Work hard, do right, and trust your gut. You'll figure the rest out." The next morning, I woke up early, same as always. Habits hard to break when you've been rising at 5 a.m. for half your life. I didn't rush out to spend the money, didn't go buy a new truck or book a fancy vacation. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I drove. I pointed the old Chevy Silverado south and hit the highway. The engine hummed, every rattle and creak familiar like an old friend. I rolled down the windows, letting the warm Oklahoma wind whip through the cab. I passed through Ardmore, then Gainesville, and crossed into Texas. The whole time, Grandpa's words echoed in my head. I wasn't chasing an answer. I was listening for one. Somewhere around Wichita Falls, I stopped at a roadside diner, Betty's Place. The kind of spot where the coffee's bottomless and the waitress calls you hon. I ordered a chicken fried steak and a side of mashed potatoes. As I ate, I watched a family at the next booth, 2 little kids sharing a slice of pie, their parents laughing. It made me think of all the Sundays Grandpa Frank and I spent on his porch, sharing a cold bottle of Coke after a long day on the ranch. No frills, just real life. When the check came, I left a $100 tip. The waitress's eyes went wide. "Sir," she stammered, "you sure?" I smiled. "Yeah, I'm sure." I hit the road again, but I didn't go home. I went to Abilene. I hadn't been to Grandpa's old ranch since he sold it, but I parked by the fence line, stepped out, and just stood there. The land looked the same. Endless sky, golden fields, the wind whispering through the tall grass. My boots crunched on the dirt, and for a second, I was that scrawny kid again, chasing after Grandpa with a coil of barbed wire over my shoulder. I didn't cry. Grandpa wouldn't want that. But I felt him there, plain as day. That night, back in my apartment, I sat at the table, the check still in front of me. $2 million. I felt the weight of it, the responsibility, the chance. This wasn't about buying shiny toys or showing off. This was about something bigger. This was about building something, not for someone else this time, but for me. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for damn sure. I wasn't going to waste what Grandpa Frank gave me. Not 1 cent. And with that, I folded the check carefully, set it down, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Hope. I didn't blow the money. No Ferraris, no wild vacations, no gold watches. That wasn't me. I wasn't raised to throw away what I didn't earn. But I sure as hell wasn't going to let it sit and gather dust either. I knew one thing. Hard work builds something real, but smart money makes something last. So, I decided to make Grandpa Frank proud. I wasn't going to spend his legacy. I was going to grow it. First thing I did was find someone who knew more than me about money. That's how I met Jim Lawson, a financial advisor with a small office on Brookside in Tulsa. His place wasn't flashy, wood-paneled walls, a desk stacked with paperwork, and a faded OSU Cowboys banner. Jim was a straight shooter, mid-50s, always in a brown suit that looked like it came from Sears back in the 90s. He shook my hand firm and said, "Jack, you don't need to know everything about money. You just need to know who to trust. And you can trust me." Something about him felt solid, like Grandpa Frank would have liked him. We sat down and I told him straight, "Jim, I don't want to gamble. I want to build. Something real. Something that lasts." He nodded. "Good. No get-rich-quick schemes. We invest in things you understand. Now, what do you know?" I thought about it. I know trucks. Freight. I know how things move from A to B because I've been on the loading docks hauling crates. Jim's eyes lit up. Logistics. Now that's an industry that never stops. How about this? I know a company in Dallas. Ironbridge Logistics. Small outfit, but they're moving fast. They're looking for investors to expand their fleet and routes. You could get in early. The next day, I drove down to Dallas in my old Chevy Silverado. Jim set me up to meet with Tom Carter, the owner of Ironbridge. The office wasn't much, just a prefab building off I-35, the kind that rattles when the wind blows. But Tom? Tom was my kind of guy. Blue jeans, a trucker's cap, and a handshake like a vice grip. He built Ironbridge from one truck and a dream. He showed me their operation. Rows of Peterbilt rigs lined up, drivers running loads from Fort Worth to Houston and back. Their warehouse hummed with forklifts, and dispatch radios crackled with chatter. I could feel the heartbeat of the business. Constant motion, goods moving, money flowing. "We're solid," Tom said, leaning on his truck hood. "But we need more trucks, more drivers, and a better routing system to grow. Banks are slow, and investors want too big a piece. You'd be our partner, Jack. You'd have a seat at the table." I didn't need more convincing. I put in $1 million, half of what Grandpa left me. It felt right. I wasn't some silent investor. I was part of something real. I started visiting every month, walking the yards, meeting the drivers. I knew their names, Manny, Big Ed, Crystal, and they knew mine. When they saw me, they saw a guy who worked with his hands, not some suit who'd never swung a wrench. With my other million, Jim had another idea. "Jack," he said, "ever hear of Streamline Analytics?" I shook my head. "Sounds like something out of Silicon Valley." He chuckled. "It's a startup out of Austin. 3 engineers who quit their cushy jobs to build software that helps companies track inventory and cut shipping costs. It's early, but they've got patents pending and a big client nibbling. H-E-B Grocers, down in San Antonio." I wasn't a tech guy, but I understood logistics. If these folks could help companies like Ironbridge move smarter and cheaper, that sounded like a good bet. So, I met with them. The Streamline office was a rented space in a tech incubator off South Congress Avenue. Brick walls, beanbag chairs, and white boards covered in scribbles. Their CEO, Adam Kerr, was younger than me, all sneakers and hoodies, but sharp as hell. He broke it down in plain English. "Jack, companies lose millions every year because they don't know where their inventory is or how long shipments are really taking. Our software tracks it all in real time. Less waste, faster delivery, more profit. That's what we sell." I asked, "And you can prove that works?" Adam grinned. "H-E-B wouldn't be testing it if we couldn't." I liked the guy. He was young, but he was hungry. I knew that feeling. So, I put the other $1 million into Streamline Analytics. Then, I waited. And I worked. I didn't quit my job at Tom's Auto Shop, not right away. Work kept me grounded. I still came home smelling like oil, and I still drank my coffee from a chipped mug. Money didn't change that. I kept driving my old Chevy Silverado, too, patched up seat, busted radio, and all. But behind the scenes, my money was working. First, Ironbridge started rolling. With my investment, they bought 8 new Kenworth T680 rigs and opened new routes from Dallas to New Orleans. Business boomed, especially when they landed a contract with Walmart for regional deliveries. My monthly dividend checks started coming in, and I started seeing my share grow. Then came Streamline Analytics. At first, nothing. 6 months of silence except for quarterly updates. But then bam! HEB signed a long-term contract. And that was just the beginning. Within a year, Streamline landed 2 more clients, Whole Foods and FedEx Supply Chain. Their stock value skyrocketed. My $1 million investment turned into $7 million. Just like that. I was rich. But here's the thing. I didn't change. Sure, I bought a couple of things. I traded in my old Chevy Silverado, but not for a sports car. I bought a black Cadillac Escalade, something reliable with room for hauling supplies and road trips to visit my businesses. Comfortable, but practical. And yeah, I bought a place. Not some mansion, just a solid, 4-bedroom ranch-style home in Plano, Texas. Red brick, a wide porch with a couple of rocking chairs, and a backyard big enough for barbecues. It reminded me of Grandpa Frank's place. Warm, simple, real. But I didn't change who I was. I still wore my flannel shirts and old work boots. Boots that had walked miles of dirt, grease, and hard-earned sweat. I still drank diner coffee and left big tips. I still talked to folks the way Grandpa taught me, straight and honest. I kept working too, just in a different way. I was on-site at Ironbridge every month, walking the yards, riding in the rigs, and learning the business inside and out. The drivers called me boss, but I told them, just call me Jack. And with Streamline, I stayed in the loop. I wasn't a tech guy, but I learned how their software worked and how it saved companies money. I was on every quarterly call, and when they opened a new office in Dallas, I was there, shaking hands and thanking employees personally. I didn't just invest in businesses. I invested in people, because that's what Grandpa taught me. A year after I invested that first dollar, Jim Lawson and I met for coffee. Same booth at the diner on Brookside. He slid a piece of paper across the table, my net worth statement. It said, $12.3 million. I stared at it, then looked up at Jim. So, I said with a grin, did I build something real? Jim chuckled. Jack, you didn't just build something real. You built something strong. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because I had built something that no one could take from me. No one. Business was booming. Ironbridge Logistics had expanded its routes from Dallas to Atlanta, Chicago, and Phoenix. We ran a fleet of Kenworth T680s, and our drivers were moving everything from groceries to electronics. Meanwhile, Streamline Analytics was taking over the logistics tech game, and companies couldn't get enough of our software. With all the growth, I decided it was time to bring the accounting for my operations in-house. Up until then, we'd been using a third-party firm out of Fort Worth, but the numbers were getting too big, and I wanted more control. So, I told my HR director, Carolyn Reed, to start hiring for a full accounting division. Carolyn was sharp, mid-40s, ran HR like a drill sergeant, but had a heart as big as Texas. She'd been with me since Ironbridge started expanding and knew exactly what I wanted. No nonsense, no drama, just results. A few weeks later, Carolyn walked into my office in our new corporate building off Preston Road in Plano. The place was fresh, glass-walled conference rooms, an open-floor layout, and my corner office with a view of the skyline. But I kept things simple: wooden desk, leather couch, and a framed photo of Grandpa Frank on the shelf. Carolyn handed me a stack of onboarding papers. "Here's the final batch of hires for accounting," she said, brushing her short brown hair behind her ear. "Top pick for chief accountant is already processing payroll reports. Solid resume, MBA, worked at Redwood Financial Group and First National Bank in OKC. Thought you'd be pleased." I flipped through the papers, scanning names and titles. Then my eyes stopped cold. Rachel Mitchell. The air in the room felt like it had thickened. I stared at the name, and for a second, the past hit me like a truck. Long nights, 3 jobs, her cold goodbye. I felt my chest clench, but I kept my face still. I cleared my throat. Rachel Mitchell? I said flatly, as if I'd never heard the name before. Carolyn nodded. Yeah, she was a hell of a find. Certified CPA, 12 years in corporate finance. She's already on top of the numbers. Cut down our payroll processing time by half. You'd like her. Straight shooter, efficient. Honestly, she reminds me a little of you. I felt a flicker of something. Irony, maybe. I leaned back in my chair, tapping the papers on my knee. Did she, mention anything about her past? Carolyn shook her head. Nope. And I didn't ask. Business is business, right? I stared at the page, her name printed crisp and bold. Rachel Mitchell. My ex-wife. The woman I built everything for. The woman who walked away because I wasn't enough. And now she was working for me. I felt something cold and sharp twist in my chest. Part of me wanted to laugh. Part of me wanted to slam the folder shut and say, fire her. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I didn't care. I had bled for my success. I had worked harder, fought longer, and built more than she could ever imagine. And if life wanted to drop her back into my world, well, let it. So, I shrugged and handed the papers back to Carolyn. She qualified? I asked. More than, Carolyn said. I nodded. Then let her do her job. For the next few weeks, I didn't see Rachel. Carolyn ran the department, and I stayed focused on expanding operations. But her name kept popping up, on financial reports, on emails, and in meeting notes. And damn it, she was good. Our books had never been tighter. Rachel caught inefficiencies in payroll that saved us $180,000 a year. She renegotiated a vendor contract, shaving 3% off our accounting software costs. And she streamlined expense reporting, which was a godsend for our drivers. She didn't just do the job. She owned it. Then came the quarterly budget review. The quarterly board meeting was a big deal. Executives from Ironbridge Logistics and Streamline Analytics all under one roof. Finance, operations, tech, and strategy. Every department was there to show results and prove they were worth their paychecks. Normally, I kept these meetings tight, straight to the point. But this one was going to be different. I hadn't seen Rachel since that first awkward conversation after the budget review. She'd been doing her job, quiet, professional, and damn good at it. But she kept her distance. No small talk. No questions. Just spreadsheets and numbers. I figured that was best. That morning, I stood in my office, adjusting the cuffs of my suit jacket. The suit was new, dark charcoal, sharp as a blade. I didn't wear suits often. Wasn't my style. But today, I felt like reminding everyone, especially her, who was at the head of the table. Still, I stayed true to myself. My old, worn leather boots stayed on my feet. Polished, but cracked from years of work. Let the silk ties and Rolex types see them and wonder. I built my empire from the ground up. I didn't need to look like money to own the room. The conference room was on the top floor. Glass walls, polished oak table, and a view that stretched clear across Plano to the Dallas skyline. Executives filed in, laptops open, charts ready. The air buzzed with tension. Quarterly meetings could make or break careers, and everyone knew it. Rachel was already at the front, laptop connected to the screen. She had dressed the part, navy blazer, heels clicking on the marble floor, hair pinned back tight. From the outside, she looked calm, collected. But I saw the twitch in her fingers as she flipped through her notes. Carolyn kicked things off. All right, folks, let's get to it. This quarter's been a ride. New contracts, expansions, and a whole lot of numbers. Rachel, you're up first. Walk us through the financials. Rachel's knuckles whitened as she gripped the clicker. She glanced at the seat at the head of the table. Empty. Her lips pressed tight. She thought I wasn't coming. The doors swung open with a soft thud. I walked in. Conversations died. Laptops paused. Eyes lifted. Rachel's face, pale as drywall. Her eyes locked on mine, wide as a Texas highway. The clicker in her hand trembled, her knuckles tight around it. I didn't smile, didn't nod. Just took my seat at the head of the table. Go ahead, I said flatly. Let's hear it. Rachel swallowed hard. Her voice started steady. Numbers, percentages, quarterly earnings. But there was a crack underneath, like a dried-up creek bed ready to split. Revenue increased by 12% from last quarter, she began, her eyes darting to the screen, anywhere but me. Thanks to operational efficiencies and reduced overhead, net profit margin has climbed to 18.5%. The screen flashed charts and graphs. Earnings climbing, costs shrinking. I already knew the numbers were solid. Carolyn had briefed me. Rachel had done her job, but her voice, it faltered. And projected savings for Q4 are estimated at, she paused, her breath catching. She clicked the next slide. Too fast. The numbers blurred. She clicked again. Wrong page. Her voice cracked. Sorry, just a moment. The room was dead silent. No one dared to breathe. Her hand shook as she corrected the slide. Projected savings. I cut in, my voice cool and steady. 17.2%. You had it on the last page. She froze. Her eyes lifted, met mine. The room held its breath. Right, she said softly, her voice tight. 17.2%. The presentation limped forward. She stumbled once more on the capital expenditure summary, her throat dry. The woman who once commanded boardrooms with her confidence was cracking under the weight of the moment. When she finished, the silence was thick. Carolyn, ever the professional, broke it. Thank you, Rachel. Strong numbers. Next up, operations. I didn't say a word. I just stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked out. Back in my office, the door closed behind me with a soft click. I tossed my jacket over the chair and leaned against the window, watching the cars snake along Preston Road. I felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. Just emptiness. A soft knock. The door cracked open. Carolyn. She hesitated. Well, that was something. I didn't turn. She got the numbers right. Carolyn stepped in, crossing her arms. She did, but she was rattled. I've never seen her like that. I stayed quiet. Carolyn's voice softened. Jack, you good? I turned from the window, my voice low. Business is business. Carolyn's eyes searched my face. Sure it is. She paused. But I saw her face. And I see yours. I didn't answer. She nodded, as if deciding something. Well, she said, turning to leave, she's in her office. Thought you should know. The door closed, and the room fell silent. I stood there, heart steady, hands in my pockets. For a long minute, I didn't move. Then, I walked out, not to confront her, but to finish this, once and for all. Not 5 minutes after the board meeting ended, my office door flew open without so much as a knock. Rachel. Her heels clicked hard on the polished floor as she stormed in, her breath shallow, her face pale but flushed at the cheeks. The door swung back and thudded shut behind her. Jack, please, she started, her voice tight, the usual polish cracking around the edges. I didn't know. Let's talk. I stayed seated behind my desk, my eyes cold and steady on her. I didn't flinch, didn't move. The leather of my chair creaked slightly as I leaned back, resting one arm on the desk, my other hand still on the mouse. The numbers from her presentation were still glowing on my monitor. She stepped closer, her voice trembling now. Maybe we can. She stopped mid-sentence, her throat catching. I made a mistake. I let the silence hang for a beat, long enough for her words to fall flat between us. Then I spoke, my voice low and firm. Yeah, you did. Her eyes flicked to mine, wide and searching, but I didn't blink. You made your choice then, Rachel, I said coldly, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. It's over. I stood up slow, adjusting my cufflinks with a sharp tug. The room was deathly quiet. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner and the distant murmur of the office beyond the glass walls. I met her eyes, green, the same ones I used to lose myself in, now filled with something else entirely. Panic. And now, I said, my voice firm and final, you're fired. Her lips parted, trembling. She stepped forward, hands shaking. Jack, please, she whispered. Her voice had dropped to something raw, something that used to crack my resolve. But not today. I shook my head slowly. My voice was cold, but steady. This ain't a second chance. It's the consequence of your first one. The color drained from her face. Her throat worked as if trying to swallow back words she couldn't form. Jack, she tried again, her voice barely above a breath. You don't have to do this. I felt a flicker of something. Memory, maybe. Late nights, dreams shared over cheap wine, promises whispered in the dark. But I snuffed it out. That man, the one who believed in those dreams, died the day she walked away. I already did. I stepped back from the desk and nodded toward the door. Now get out. She stood frozen for a heartbeat, her chest rising and falling too fast, her hands clenching at her sides. Then, slowly, her shoulders sagged, and the fight in her eyes flickered and died. Without another word, she turned. Her heels tapped against the floor, but they sounded smaller now, hollow. She reached the door, her hand resting on the handle for a second too long, like she was hoping for something, anything, to stop her. But nothing came. The door opened, and then it closed. The silence that followed was heavy, but I felt nothing. Not anger, not triumph, just closure. I walked to the window, the soles of my old leather boots scuffing softly on the hardwood floor. Outside, the sun was high over Plano, casting a golden sheen on the chrome and glass of the cars in the lot below. And there she was, Rachel, sliding into a silver BMW 5 Series, the kind of car she used to dream about. Polished, expensive, a status symbol. Funny, the woman who once left me because I didn't have enough was driving away from the company built with the wealth she said I'd never have. I watched her pull out of the lot, the tires crunching softly over the gravel, the engine humming as she eased through the gate and onto Preston Road. She didn't look back. Neither did I. A soft reflection caught my eye, the frame on my bookshelf. I turned to see it. Grandpa Frank. Weathered face. Sharp eyes. His arms slung around my shoulder from that summer on the ranch in Abilene. I was maybe 10, grinning from ear to ear, covered in dirt from a day of mending fences and hauling feed. His words rang in my head, steady and sure. Jackie, life ain't about what you got. It's about what you build and who you are when you're done building it. I reached for my Stetson, the same one I'd had since those days on the ranch. The leather was worn soft from years of sun and work, but it still fit me like a second skin. I placed it on my head, tugged the brim low, and felt a slow smile tug the corners of my mouth. Life sure is funny that way. I didn't celebrate, didn't feel the need to. The next morning, I was up at dawn, same as always. The smell of coffee filled my kitchen as I stood on the porch of my ranch-style home in Plano. The house was simple, brick with a wide front porch and a pair of rocking chairs. It wasn't the biggest place money could buy, but it was mine. The sun crept up over the tree line, casting soft rays across the pasture where a couple of horses grazed lazily. Their tails flicked at the early summer flies. The air smelled like earth and grass and promise. I sipped my coffee and let the warmth settle in my chest. A vibration from my phone. A text from Carolyn. Rachel's exit package is finalized. No issues. Want me to handle hiring her replacement? I tapped out a quick reply. Yeah, find someone solid. And make sure they know this. Loyalty matters. I slid my phone back in my pocket and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. A weight I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. It was done. All of it. The past, the bitterness, the regret. Gone. The world stretched out ahead, wide and open. By mid-morning, I was at the Ironbridge Logistics truck yard, walking the rows of rigs. The sun glinted off the polished chrome grills of Kenworth T680s, their engines humming as drivers checked manifests and prepped for cross-country hauls. "Morning, boss," called Manny, wiping his hands on a rag as he stepped down from his cab. I tipped my hat. "Mornin', Manny. How's the route to Phoenix treating you?" "Smooth as butter, thanks to the new dispatch system," he said with a grin. "Cut my time by 4 hours." "Glad to hear it," I replied. "Be safe out there." Next stop was Streamline Analytics over in Dallas. The office buzzed with engineers and developers. Folks way smarter than me, but I knew their work was changing the game. I shook hands with Adam Kerr, the CEO. Jack, he said, his face lighting up. We just signed Target for our inventory tracking software. Huge contract. I grinned. That's what I like to hear, Adam. Let's keep that momentum rolling. I didn't need to be on the ground every day, but I wanted to be. Because the trucks, the warehouses, the people, this was real. This was mine. One evening, about a month later, I was back at my ranch, grilling a ribeye out by the fire pit as the sun dipped low. A soft breeze carried the smell of mesquite smoke through the air. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. A familiar voice. Soft. Shaky. Jack. Rachel. There was a pause, like she didn't know what to say, or maybe she thought I'd hang up. I wanted to say I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely a whisper. For everything. I let the silence stretch, watching the smoke curl up into the twilight sky. The cicadas hummed, steady and loud. Finally, I spoke. Calm. Steady. I know you are. Another beat of silence. Then, quietly, goodbye, Jack. I ended the call. Didn't feel anything. No weight. No pain. Just peace. The past was where it belonged. Behind me. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think of Jack's decision to fire Rachel on the spot? Was it justified or too harsh? If you like this story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.